What's going on, fellow A-plussers, fellow Force users? It is I, your host, Adam Perez, back once again with a brand new live review discussion of The Acolyte. This week, episode number 6, titled Teach, Corrupt. So it should be an interesting discussion for you guys today. Thank you first and foremost, wherever you're certainly watching us live at. We are going live over on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter today. So wherever you guys are certainly watching us from live, feel free to go ahead and certainly chime in at any time. Remember, at the end of the day, these are simply our A+ opinions, but we always want to know yours. So let us know your thoughts on episode number 6. And I say ours because it's not just myself. We have the entire Jedi Council on board today. Lucky enough to have Crystal 2 weeks in a row, man. I feel like we just hit the jackpot this week. But it's always fantastic to see everybody's face around here. Hello, Jedi Masters. How's everybody doing?
Doing well. Good to see everybody.
Doing really good.
Good. I'm glad to see everybody's doing well today. We had a bonkers episode last week in episode 5. We got some great views out of it, some great discussion topics for sure. So it should be interesting to see how episode number 6 goes here this week. We literally have 2 more left. Episode 7, the penultimate episode, and then the season finale. I think the big question right now is, will there be a season 2? After this one. It has not been greenlit yet. I'm kind of curious as to whether or not they're waiting to the finale or to see how everybody receives everything, but maybe that's something we'll talk about in this week's review. So guys, if you're watching this live, chime in. Feel free to jump in at any time. Some of the points that we make, what are your guys' thoughts on episode number 6? We definitely want to bounce some ideas off of you guys today, so feel free to jump into the live chat. But what's going on, everybody? How's everybody's weeks been? Did you feel like hung over after episode 5? Were you ready to get into episode 6? Like, were you looking forward to this week? Let me know, guys.
Well, I'll start. Everybody's like, yeah.
I never know.
No, I was like, after Stuart, like in the pre-show, pointed out that the lightsaber is going through my head. I just can't unsee it.
I keep looking at it too.
But this episode was a change of pace. I think after the big adrenaline rush that we had last week, things were intentionally slowed down, and we see this many times in shows where you have a big, mid-season either finale or premiere, and something big happens, and then the episode after that is one that it slows things down, get back into the change of pace. I mean, so that was just my quick thoughts. I don't know if you wanted to have a few other.
Did you guys have were you guys looking forward to episode 6 after episode 5? Were you thinking about episode 5 all week long type of thing? What was going on with you guys after last week?
It was, to me, underwhelming, but I also kind of like went into this episode expecting it to be underwhelming, because I knew there was no way they were going to give us like another like super epic like all-out battle like we got in the previous episode, especially because the storm was over. We were definitely going to get the calm, and so it was definitely an episode I was kind of prepared for a lot of not too much, basically.
What about you, Chris? So were you going into this week's episode expecting it to take a step back after the huge adrenaline rush after episode 5? I mean, when we got to Tuesday, like, were you amped for episode 6? Like, was your anticipation level high?
It was. I was really anticipating this episode because of what was going to happen with our characters. I feel like after episode 5, I didn't know. I was like, where are we going with this story? They just switched places. Like, I was really interested to see how it was going. I liked that it wasn't like a super crazy adrenaline episode, but I would say that this episode was more bonkers than last week.
I definitely want to pick your brain in regards to that for sure. I will say I would agree with you in the sense that I was really looking forward to this episode for sure, especially after last week. I think one of the things I mentioned before we wrapped was the direction in which they put us in now is vastly different from where we started the very first episode, now that we do have our 2 main characters on completely polar opposites of things. And so I was very much looking forward to kind of seeing how that was going to be handled. But I will say, while I understand a calm before the storm, I feel like maybe it was too calm in this episode. I wouldn't have minded a little bit more out of this one. But Crystal, let's go back to you. Overall thoughts on episode number 6. Let's kick this off.
All right. Well, my initial thoughts for this episode is Oshmere all the way, all
Oh,
aboard
no.
this ship.
Oh no.
Enemies to lovers, baby, and she delivered. So, one thing about me is I love a good ship. My favorite trope is enemies to lovers. So, even at like the slightest hint, even of like the whiff of enemies to lovers, like I'm there. Like whether it's canon or not, like it is in my head. It's on AO3. Like we're here for it. Now, do I think that Quimir is manipulating her? Yes. But I'm kind of hoping that if they really are going to do like this forced dyad between Osha and May, and it's kind of like the as above, so below, like two sides to the same coin sort of thing. I'm hoping like what they choose to do is, Quimir is like very. He manipulates May. He literally wears a mask in front of her. But with Osha, he's vulnerable and he's like literally naked. Like the symbolism is insane. So it would be cool if they went like more obvious in that way, where he's being more vulnerable and open with Osha, and they fall in love and they kiss, and then she's in the dark side. Anyways, that's all I want to talk about.
Oshmere?
Oshmere, yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that was a
like
thing
it.
already. I dig it. I dig it. I
like
dig it. I like
It's
it.
fun. It's fun, you know.
I do think I remember seeing you on Twitter posting a picture of them, and then you also posted a picture of Ray and Ben Solo, didn't you?
Yes, and also Zeb and Callus from Rebels.
That's right, from Rebels. That's right.
Yeah.
Oshmere. I'm gonna have to write that. I'm gonna have to write that one down. That was a great one.
We know where it starts. If it goes viral, it started right here with Christmas.
We
So.
started
right here.
It started on Twitter. I can't take. Wait, what did we
okay.
say last week? Didn't we say something last week too?
Oh yeah, Smilo Ren. Yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't me. I saw it on Twitter somewhere, or maybe another podcast.
Since you are a big shipper, did you think Ray and Ben was forced?
Okay, so I'm gonna be really real with y'all. Like I watched the sequels one time and then never again. So no hate to people that like it. Like that's cool, but I kind of just forgot about it. Like I think Raylo is fun because it is enemies to lovers, but it's just not my flavor of enemies to lovers, you know?
I get you.
What do you think?
Yeah. I literally just finished watching The Rise of Skywalker yesterday. Like I decided to rewatch it because I hadn't in such a long time. I was halfway through it. I stopped. I watched this week's episode of The Acolyte, and then I went and finished Rise of the Skywalker. And I still feel it was kind of forced. For me, it wasn't something that I really wanted. I remember seeing it on screen. And I'm like, are they gonna do it? Please don't do it. Oh my god, they're kissing. Oh my god. And it was over for me. So I didn't need it. I don't think it was necessary. But
it was forced, and when you think about it, technically they are related because it's implied heavily that Palpatine created Vader through the Force, which would make them technically kind of related. So it's kind of gross when you think of it. So that's what I always hated about first of all, yeah, I do agree it was forced, like regardless, but I also just always thought like, wait, but isn't Palpatine also like Anakin's father technically?
So you believe this is a dyad, huh? In the Force, you think that's the direction they're going with this, Crystal?
I don't know. I've been hearing people throw that around between like Osha and May. They can kind of hear each other's thoughts. They're really selling this like as above, so below, you are me, I am you sort of thing. So
okay, yeah, okay. I could definitely see that between the twins for sure. But I like your perspective on this week's episode, most definitely. I was thinking to myself, like, are we gonna get a butt scene in here when fucking Cormier's going in the lake? I was like,
where was it?
After
well,
Crystal's like, I'm waiting. Maybe it's in the like extended episode.
Right.
Maybe they'll release that later.
Yeah, I think that comes from like watching Game of Thrones and then going to Star Wars afterwards, because it's in Game of Thrones, it would have just been there and it would have been like nothing. But like in Star Wars, we're like, wait, are we?
My thing was like, I was so kind of turned off by the what was the what was the other guy that just died? The other Jedi, Yord. When they walked in on him steaming his clothes or ironing his thing, I was like, it was just the most random thing.
It
This
was.
this one at least felt like there was
Yeah.
context behind it. Like it was more of a natural thing. The other one was just way too forced for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like Crystal mentioned, like there was like actual symbolism behind it. Like it actually kind of there was a purpose behind that scene.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like in the water. He's like coming out of the water and he's like vulnerable. And it's like, it's so symbolic. So
I get it.
Just hope it
All right.
just,
Let's
just for his sake, hope it wasn't cold water. But anyway,
she was not impressed. Let's Will.
we saw where his eyes went. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It was all in the eyes. Will, what did you overall thoughts on episode 6 for you, buddy?
Yeah, I thought it was an okay episode. It was, I think it had the weight of, after last week's big adrenaline surge, as I talked about earlier, really the weight of like what's going to happen next, and we were all wondering where are they going to go with this, the Parent Trap and all, and so so I think at least on the I did like the fact that the way, speaking of the way that Osha and Cormier were, he was like, he was all sensing it. He knew what was going on. On the flip side, you had Soul and May, and I'm still, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, is whether or not Saul was playing dumb or was he really oblivious to the fact that that was May until things happened there, because the way it was shot, you could really, it could go either way. I mean, and I feel that this is where I thought the episode did do that well, as far as the making him like look like a bumbling Jedi. I mean, the critical aspect of it could be like, well, wait a minute, he's been a competent Jedi up to this point, so now he is like all of a sudden a fool. So I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on that. And again, as far as the symbolism there, Crystal nailed it. I mean, that was truly, I think, what made this episode work, for me. And it was, with this series, we know we're 6 episodes in. We know we have well chronicled the issues with the timing and all that kind of stuff, and it is what it is. But yeah, I thought that was, I thought overall it was good. And I know the last thing is uh, the matter of perspective really played hard here in this episode,
Mm.
with, as far as what Crimea Smilo Ren was telling Osha, as far as again, getting into the Force, getting into the lore, getting into the dark side versus the good side versus the dark side, going back to the witches, as far as like, are the Jedi is the only way to practice the Force in the galaxy. Anybody else really just sort of falls under the big umbrella of dark side. So I really like the way they were really exploring that. And again, it's all about perspective as far as points of view. So those were the things that I thought was stood out to me in this episode. And I saw one comment in the chat about the planet. I do think that planet is the planet that Luke was on years later down the line. I think that was Acho,
Octu or something like that.
Octu, yeah. I mean, it just had, the fact that they said unknown planet, but it clearly is like a Force center. I think that's just, again, they don't. One great thing about Leslie Headland with this show is when she puts stuff out there, she doesn't just put it out there just for like fan service. There is a purpose to it. So I think this was just sort of helping, again, establishing the lineage between what's going on in the events here in the Acolyte and what we see down the line.
I will jump on board the comment you made about Leslie Headland putting things in the show. Like, she puts them in there for a reason. I will dive into that a little bit later, but maybe that is something that we should talk about, though, about what you mentioned, Will. The idea of soul in this episode. Before we get to you, Stuart, and your thoughts, how did you guys feel like that played itself out? Were you under the impression Soul did not know until the very last minute, or do you think he was playing along watching this?
Go ahead, Stuart. You can say so. I haven't,
I was just gonna say I was under the impression, because they really show how exhausted he is. I think that was for the purpose of showing us that, even though he could have sensed whether or not it was Osha by using the Force, he just kind of didn't think to do so. So to me, it kind of felt like he didn't really tap into the Force until he noticed something was up. And I think he noticed something was up when it came to like May's response in returns in terms of like when Soul was like talking about the droid and like May's, or Osha's connection with the droid. I think that was what gave it away, and that's what had Soul actually like realize something's not right here. And then I don't think he zapped her without immediately like looking into her with the Force, pretty much. So I think pretty personally that he was fooled, but mostly because he wasn't trying to, he wasn't looking for deception, and therefore he couldn't see it.
What about you, Crystal? Do you think that was the moment, or do you think he knew all along?
Yeah, I think it was something with Pip, like tipped him off, which I don't know, I thought was very frustrating because like the little raccoon creature knows, Pip knows, but this Jedi Master doesn't know. Like he's a Jedi Master. Like how does he not know? But I think what you were just saying, Stuart, like maybe he already like trusted in her, and maybe he has like a lot of other things going on, so that's why he didn't know that it was May. But I was like really frustrated with him. I'm like, come on, dude, like you're so strong in the Force. Like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Will. No, go ahead, Will.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, I completely agree with both of you, but I think there's, there are a few other counterpoints where like he didn't entrust her with fixing the ship and things, that just so carry the ruse forward, even though, so I think it's probably an 80-20. I mean, 80% of me feels like he was just exhausted, shell-shocked as far as what happened. He's frustrated because he can't communicate back to the Coruscant. But there's still 20% of me is sort of like, maybe he was actually playing along and they're just kind of stretching this out just to like, because they need to pad out the story.
Yeah, Stuart, that was definitely the first time that it jumped out at me that I thought, oh, he's on to her, was the Pip moment. But rewatching the episode again, there's a part of me when he's trying to communicate, and he's at the cockpit and he's trying to communicate, and she sneaks up the ladder and on board, and she whips out the knife, sort of thing. She's dead ass silent, and he calls her out while she's behind him. And I think he purposefully uses the name Osha because, one, I think he can sense her behind him. But I think it's a for me at least, it was like, well, if he can sense her creeping up on him, clearly he's like paying attention to something, right? So for some reason, I think that is a telltale sign that he knew that was her. But maybe that's me hoping that this man knew the whole entire time and not up until Pip. But I think the fact that he recognizes her in the Force sneaking up behind him before she gets there makes me think he kind of knew all along and was playing along with it. But I could be reading into that myself, though.
No, that would actually make a lot of sense. Either way.
I'm sorry, Crystal. I curse a lot. I'm from New York, so if I curse, I see you jumping over there like, oh. Like,
oh no, because I agree.
Oh, okay. Because I try not to curse too much. I don't want to get too demonetized, but yeah, okay.
I was gonna say that I think that's why it was so frustrating for me as the viewer, just being like, okay, you can sense someone behind you, but you don't know who it is. And I think if Soul did know, I think that the writing or something didn't really communicate that to us, the audience.
Right. The execution of it probably could have been better. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I did have something to say about that scene specifically before we move on. Like, what are May's what's her motivation? Because in the previous episode, she was going to give herself up to the Jedi. She was going to go find her sister and then not kill any of the Jedi. And then this episode, she still wants to kill the Jedi. Like, girl, what are you doing?
Yeah. That's very frustrating about this show. I mean, I put a pin in that.
The only thing
Darkside.
the only thing I can think of is right now I don't think she gives any Fs anymore. I think she had all good intention of trying to reach out to the Jedi and surrender and things like that. But I think once she realizes like hell, even my sister isn't welcoming or isn't gonna take me in, you know, even she wants to arrest me. Like clearly my agenda of me and my sister coming one again and going off and doing our own thing, like I think that was May's end goal. And when that went up in flames, she's probably just like, you know what, I'm gonna burn it all down sort of mentality. That's kind of what I'm taking away from it, because her bonding with her sister kind of failed at the end of episode 5. But still, again, I think you bring up a point, the fact that you as a viewer, and I've seen other people bring that up too, I think that goes to show maybe some of the weak writing, or at least the execution of what you're trying to get across not coming along as well as you'd like. Stuart, what about you? Overall thoughts on episode 6, man?
So I half really liked this episode, and I half was really disappointed by this episode. I think like the best way to describe it is to compare it to the second act of the Last Jedi, where like whenever we were doing the Rey and Luke scenes, like I was like super into it, but then every time we switched over to like Finn and Rose, that's when I'm like, can we move on from this planet? Can we move on from, I think it was Kento Bite, and that's how I felt watching the scenes with May and Soul. Like those scenes were just, you know, there just wasn't anything interesting going on, which is a shame, because like I was really looking forward to seeing the interaction between the two of them. This was the part of the episode I was the most excited for. Now, I'm not disappointed that we didn't get the answers that Soul keeps teasing us about. Like, you know, we get in episode 4, once we get to the ship, I will explain everything. Once we get to episode 5, it's what does he mean? What does he mean you've been deceiving me? I'll explain everything on the ship, I swear. And then we get to episode 6, and it ends with, now it's time for me to explain everything. Like, I don't mind the teases, but you got to give me something interesting in between. But everything we had on the ship was just padding, and it was just you know, it was a bunch of either plot conveniences or just a plot that made no sense, because the ship shutting down just, you know, felt like a complete plot convenience, unless like it was the I'm so sorry, I forgot the rodent's name, but unless
Basil.
it was that Basil. Yeah, unless it was Basil, because Basil was trying to get to Soul and for some reason needed to shut the ship down to do so. I don't know, because the episode was not clear about that at all. So that was just, it felt like padding, basically. That whole thing on the ship was just padding. But then everything that happened on the unknown planet, where we get Osha with the Sith in this, I loved everything between the two of them. Their dynamic, the way he's very clearly manipulating her, but he's manipulating her through a very different tactic than what he used with her sister, either because he knows that tactic won't work on her, or because he actually does see more potential with her than he saw in her sister. I don't know, but I absolutely love the fact that, you know, I'm just as like, even though we're learning more about this Sith and what his motivations are, we still don't really know anything about him and what his motivations are, even as we're learning more about him, which I absolutely love. And yeah, I love his whole tactic of being more vulnerable to her, being more like, you know, honest, even if it's in a deceptive way. It seems like he is still being honest in his own kind of Sithy kind of way. And I like that. I loved the dialogue between the two of them, the way he justifies using the dark side by saying, you know, the Jedi, you know, you say using emotion in the Force is the dark side, and that's all a matter of opinion. You know, I loved that whole aspect of the episode. But then every time we cut back to the ship, I was like, come on, can we have something interesting happen here?
You know, Stu, I echo that 100%, man. I think if there was a weak point for this episode for me too, it was that all the dark side stuff. I was like, more, please. But then when you went back on the ship, I'm like, can something happen? Like, what's kind of going on? It was just like very subtle things would happen, but you're right. There are moments when it just felt like some padding to it, and I think your opinion was spot on in regards to like how I took away from that particular episode also. But yeah, I was eating all the dark side stuff in this week's episode. Any guys want to bounce off of anything what he said?
No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, that's that sums up this episode and quite frankly this series.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, actually.
Right?
Really,
It's
it
always
does.
a tale of two stories, right? Like
Yeah.
one side's usually the stronger than the other. It's hard to find that good balance. For me, when it comes to this episode, yeah, like I said, Stu, I kind of echo everything. There were elements of this episode I was a really big fan of. Other ones just kind of fell by the wayside for me. I really enjoyed all the dark side elements of this episode. I also really enjoyed, you guys talked a little bit about the symbolism in this episode. I really, if there was anything symbolic I took away from this episode, it was probably also just how different Quamir and Soul treated their captives, if you will. The idea that you have somebody like Quamir who really just lets who lets Osha just kind of walk around the island, right? No restraints, sort of thing. Just allowing her to make her own choices and whether she wants to stay, whether she wants to go, having very sort of honest and open, conversations with her about what's going on. Clearly manipulative, but to a point that he clearly really connects with her. I thought they had incredible chemistry in here. I really love the two of them together on screen. I was just hooked anytime that I saw them on here. Whereas you go to the opposite side of the end, and by the opposite side, and by the end of this episode, you got May in handcuffs, tied down to a stretcher or whatever the case may be, and Soul like having her captive and like feeling like he's empowered to finally tell May about what's kind of going on, right? And so it just shows really two fascinating opposite ends of things and some great symbolism in regards to seeing how Quamir treats Osha as well as Soul kind of treating May. So that was really kind of eye-opening for me in this episode a little bit. You know, I talked about this last week too about Amandla Stenberg and the idea of like her performances, right? That I felt like given her double duty is really taking a toll on her, maybe too much. She shines when she plays the dark side. Like it doesn't matter if she's May, it don't matter if she's Osha. When she plays the dark side, that is when I love Amandla Stenberg. But even her as May pretending to be Osha was just as boring. Like it was just as dry. Like I could not. And maybe it kind of goes back to a little bit to what Crystal was saying. Like, what's your point, May? Like, it just even her pretending to be Osha just does not connect very well with me. And I just don't know if it's her performance, if it's how they've written the character to be kind of just that boring. I don't know what it is, but I just have a really tough time connecting with her when she's sort of on the light side of things. She comes across really flat to me. I'm still not a fan of the actress that plays Vernestra in here, as I think it's Rebecca Henderson, if I'm not mistaken. I feel like she's one of the weaker links in this show, but then again, I kind of want to see how her character plays out by the end of this season. There were some people I saw online questioning the idea, when we get Quamir showing off, the scars on his back. I saw some people like, oh my God, that looks like a light whip lightsaber, might have done that. Were they past, master and apprentice? Did she do that? And a lot of people are really thinking like maybe Vernestra is playing a bigger role in this than she's letting on. And if that's the case, maybe Rebecca Henderson is the perfect role for Vernestra. But for me right now, it just feels just out of place for me. Like I'm not really a big believer. I'm just not connecting with her when she's on screen. And that's a little bit of a bummer because I really wanted to enjoy Vernestra, as I'm a big fan of the High Republic novels, but I just don't like her presentation or how she's kind of being performed in this episode. But for me, like I said, the big thing for me was definitely the dark side stuff, learning about that a little bit more, seeing how these two end up bonding. And I think the idea too that we've been able to put the pieces together of Osha's Osha's feelings and her emotions and her past, for me, makes it extremely believable that we get to this point and she's now sort of being seduced and tempted and tempted towards the dark side. I mean, when we talk about the idea of like you know, how she feels about her time as a Jedi, why she wanted to leave, you know, the idea of having hope that the Jedi would want to take her back, and then just kind of falling flat and realizing, oh, they just really want to use me to get my sister, sort of thing. She's constantly being cut down and pushed aside, sort of thing, and you get to see that all throughout this season. And I think if they have done a great thing, it definitely is building up Osha to get to this particular point. So those are definitely some of the elements about this week's episode I was a big fan of, for sure.
Yeah, I had like written in my notes that Vernestra is so suspect. She is being like so weird this episode, and I'm like, okay, maybe like her acting isn't bad. Maybe she's just like really hiding something. I think like she might be like setting up Soul, like maybe she was Quimir's master at one point. I don't know. But yeah, she's just being really, really suspect. I do want to say, like, her using the light whip, like, personally, I was not very impressed with the light whip. Controversial, I know, but she used it on a bug. Like, what? But that's why I think, like, why would you introduce like a light whip to have her use it on a bug? And it's just like, okay, now what? Without it coming into play again later. So
And I think that also builds off of what Will said, right? Is that like Leslie Headland doesn't put anything into an episode if it doesn't mean to come back later. So there's reason why I believe that maybe there is a connection of Vernestra Rose showing the light whip and then also Quimir's scars in the same episode. Maybe that will come into play, right? Like we asked the same question when we saw Soul take out his lightsaber and chop down the bug in that one episode. We're like, what did he do that for, right? And then it comes back to play in the next episode also. So there's certainly reason to believe that there's more to it.
Yeah, speaking of callbacks, I whenever, even though I completely agree with Finestra, it's, you know, some of this we just won't know until we get to the end of the series, the end of the season. But I will say, to the callbacks, there was one line that did stand out with me whenever they were talking about reporting things to the council, and we're always transparent with them. And then they had, I did remember the callback. We had a lot of discussions about how the Jedi didn't, you know, it was like a subset of the group that didn't take things to the larger council.
Secrets on secrets on secrets.
Secrets. Yeah. Yeah. So that was a really, I did like that callback. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. But I agree, Crystal. I mean, they're setting it up for that. She was indeed Quimir's master back in the day, and he was the Padawan. And so it's, you know, and also, you know, so how does that play into the larger story? As far as, does it play in anything what happened on the at the Coven, and who did Saul really save that night? Was it really, did he actually save May? It's not, and not Osha, or who knows? But I just, I think that character, yeah, you know, she's maybe playing to understate it and stuff, and maybe at the end of the day it was intentional, and maybe, you know, 2 weeks from now we'll be like, oh, now we see why they did it this way. But
yeah, that's why I was like, I don't know if that's just how she's playing the character, because there's more coming. And if that's the case, okay, I totally get it. But right now it just feels a little underwhelming to me. I'm just not a fan. But I totally get the idea that there certainly could be more there.
Yeah, but there are some things too with it too, just as far as like some editing choices that they made. Like, for example, when they come across all the Jedi who were slaughtered, and they're like, oh, you know, it was like, let's go back to the ship. But then, you know, but then as she's walking off, she's like, we need to do a proper burial. I'm like, that just doesn't seem, I don't know if that was a post edit thing where they were just like, oh crap, we didn't set that scene up right, so now we got to add something to post production and say, oh, we got to, like, you know, deal with these bodies, or what, or is it a clue? I mean, so maybe, you know, so maybe again that's where they're trying to like set up her shadiness, and all, or maybe it was just a bad edit. Who knows?
Yeah. To me, it like felt like there were two things. Like, one, it could be like her wanting to cover up that it was her, you know, ex Padawan, or two, it could also just be like, you know, if the Jedi are buried on the planet and not on Coruscant, you know, it's less likely the people inspecting the Jedi temple, which is like a thing that was brought up, would notice, you know, would ask questions about, you know, oh, why are you know, 12 Jedi all of a sudden being you know, buried here on you know, Coruscant.
Yeah.
Shout out real quick to Marcelino in the chat. I saw him pop up in here. He's been pretty active today. We also got Seen a Nerd podcast in the house. Is that you?
Yeah,
Is that you,
that's
Will?
me.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
okay.
me.
Okay. I wasn't sure
Yeah.
if that was you or Sarah. Okay. We got old Mr. Chris in the house. He says Jamie Green Curtis over here. Maybe they should have tried to get Jamie Lee Curtis for that role, man. That would have been a great one for her for sure. I would love to see Jamie Curtis as a master one day, Jedi master.
Yeah, Stuart, you made a good point there. Though, with the I forgot about that with the scene where they were having the senator coming in to inspect.
Yeah.
Because again, that gets into the larger conspiracy mystery of like what really happened. Not only happened now as far as present day, but does go back to what happened, 16 years ago that night in the Coven.
Mm-hmm. Marciano says, so Adam, since you read the High Republic books with what Vernestra went through in the books, would it make sense for her to go to the dark side, or does it come out of nowhere? Well, she's relatively young in these books as of right now. I'm still finishing up phase 1. There are 2 other phases. Phase 2 is more of a prequel stories kind of leading into phase 1. And then phase 3, I don't know how many years have passed in phase 3 as of right now, but when I'm reading it, she's probably about 16, maybe 17 years old. She's one of the youngest Jedi Knights that they've had during that time. I think she became a Jedi Knight at the age of 15. So super powerful, very intelligent girl, but she has the light whip at that age. But I do think it's also important to realize, for people that haven't read the books, she doesn't tell anybody about her light whip, because of the fact that she thinks that her master, along with the rest of the council, will look down upon it, because the idea of her messing with it is very Darkside-esque, I guess. Or they look down upon it in that sense, that if they knew about it, they probably would kind of question her. And so the fact that she's kind of keeping that as a secret to herself, maybe that's kind of like the beginnings of what else she can kind of keep from them, so I definitely have more reading to do, but right now she's very much a lightsider for sure, but she definitely keeps some of her thoughts and her light whip to herself for sure.
Mm-hmm. It is like also kind of interesting how from the other Jedi, like in the temple, they don't seem to be as like worried about the, inspection going on. But, you get to her, she refers to the people, wanting to check up on them as political enemies in a way, which is, I think that was like in the second episode, she refers to them as political enemies, which seems to be like an only her kind of thing.
Oh, like her viewpoint on the senators and stuff.
Yeah, whereas like so far from what we've seen from other Jedi in the council, or not in the council, but in the temple, no one really seems to have that worry like she does.
I do have a question, since we are talking about Vernestra and we're talking about the dark side elements a little bit. He does mention to Osha in this episode that he was once a Jedi, so we did learn that about him this week. He also hints at the idea that he's quite old, right? Like Osha says, "Oh, I haven't heard of you before," and he was like, "I've been Jedi a long, long time ago, almost like maybe 50, 100 years." Like it feels like something unnatural, right? Like he's older than he certainly looks. So, he does mention also. He says, "Someone threw me away," referring to his scars, and Osha says, "Your former Jedi master," and he doesn't say anything. Now, he's been open about the idea of him being a Jedi at some point, but he doesn't reference the idea that it was his Jedi master. Do you think, okay, if we are making the connection, Vernestra might have been Quimir's Padawan at some point in time, could what he be saying be absolutely true? That yes, I was a Jedi years ago. Maybe they were, but maybe he left and somebody else maybe gave him those scars. Maybe he had a different teacher. Or are you under the impression that the person that gave him his scars could possibly be Vernestra?
So this goes into what my theory was that I hinted at before we went live. I think Vanestra gave that to him because he was about to do something really bad, and she had to stop him basically. Not cast him aside, but she had to stop him, and she thought it led to his death, but it didn't. And I think that she didn't want his name to be tainted. So I think she just told the Jedi Council that he died, like, doing his duty as a Jedi. So that's why I think he didn't say it was his master that, tossed him aside. Because she didn't necessarily toss him aside, but she didn't want him to do like whatever it was he was doing. Like, I'm assuming she may have actually had a good reason for doing it. But my biggest thing is too, like, we see the scar on his back. Like, I think Adam, you brought this up, and it just, it kind of looked like a whip, like kind of scar. And so when you see that her lightsaber is a whip in that exact same episode we're introduced to his scar, that's what kind of makes me put those pieces together that, he was her, a Padawan. And I think she puts that piece together when they're on the planet and she sees like the, basically the type of tactics that were used to kill these Jedi. And I think that's why she didn't want to jump on like throwing Soul under the bus, but she wasn't against it either. It seemed the moment, what was his name? Jedi,
Kiadi Mundi?
No, the other Jedi that was with her, Mog, that was his name.
Mog,
when Mog brought up the accusation that what if Soul did this, she didn't necessarily say no, you're wrong, but she was just kind of like, that's quite an accusation. So I think that she's more willing to throw Soul under the bus than admit that she allowed her own Padawan to turn to the dark side.
Damn. Do you guys kind of agree and jump on board with that theory, or do you think there's still somebody else that he's referring to?
I agree with that. That's a great theory, and it's consistent with what we've seen in this show. I mean, they spoon fed the mystery here as far as like the stranger. I mean, they didn't try. We all like agreed it was like, okay, it's Quimera who's going to be that. Now there is the wild card, and I know I think Jeff Snyder and I know somebody in the chat last week, and I remember when I saw that Jeff Snyder who. He's a pundit, columnist. Probably remember from Schmodown and some other things. It used to be with Collider.
He does a lot of the leaks and rumors, right?
Yeah,
He
leaks and rumors and stuff.
Yeah.
So he in his newsletter put a rumor out there that David Harewood, who was in Supergirl, was cast in this show. So that's the wild card here. If it's not Vanestra, it could be the Harewood's potential character, assuming that scoop is true. So if that's the case, then Stewart's theory is mostly, I think it still could work in the way he's constructed it, but then there is this this other master or whoever that was really the key to Quimera's leaving the order.
Yeah, I'm kind of I have a feeling that this one is a red herring. I feel like there is somebody else behind there that gave him those scars. I think he's truthful about the idea of him being a Jedi. It wouldn't surprise me if Vanestra was his former master. How he got booted, that I don't know, but I feel like the person that gave him the scars is somebody different that he's not willing to admit as to who it is yet, not letting Osha in that close yet. So I think that's the red herring in this season.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Stuart. I think that you're onto something.
That's a good one.
Like when you were talking and explaining like why this theory made sense, I just like had another light bulb moment, and I was thinking about like why would Quimera like pick May to like attack these Jedi? Like, why is it so personal? Like, why is he like doing this with Osha? And if it is Vernestra, sorry, who kind of like kicked him out of the Jedi Order, or like gave him away or threw him away or whatever, it would make sense why he picked May and Osha to be his apprentice, because it's so personal. Like, them killing their masters is exactly what he wants to be doing. I think Vernestra also says a line when she's like looking for the bodies. She says something to tip the scales. I don't know. She says something where it's like she knows. She knows. Like, she knows it's Quimir. I don't know. Maybe it's just like a
Well,
feeling I'm getting, but
that's the second time that she's mentioned that. I think when she had a moment with Saul before he went on the mission, he was like, he's like, I don't know, but there's something like something's going on that's kind of looking to tip the scales or unbalance things. And this
Yeah.
is the second time that she's kind of brought it up.
Yeah, that was in I think the very first episode when they had the discussion about Indira's murder. That this person was, trained in the arts or something.
That's
I don't know.
Yeah, she's the one that brings it up. And because the other person's like, oh, you think she was trained by a Jedi Master? And she's like, obviously, like you could see it, right? So yeah, you're right. Even Raphael agrees. And he's like, I'm all in on Vanessa, to be honest. She's acting so dodgy. So yeah, maybe she's showing her hands. Maybe she's showing her hands.
The only reason I'm somewhat hoping I'm wrong is because I think David Harwood would be awesome to add to the Star Wars franchise. But, I'm cool with waiting if they want to add him into something else,
Yeah. Well, maybe he could still be like Quimir's master. Like maybe he was the one that turned Quimir to the dark side. He saw his potential, took him. And so maybe Quimir is trying to get his apprentice so he can kill his master and be the master.
Yep, the same old cycle.
I mean, I guess if there's anybody that honestly, like out of all the people that Quimir could have gotten, like May or Osha, like you definitely want Osha. And I only say that because she was a former Jedi. Like there's probably less training he has to do. And I think that's one of the things I loved about this episode too, was it felt like he was building on top of what Saul kind of established for Osha, and making slight corrections or giving a different perspective and point of view of what Saul kind of taught her. And the fact that he has that ground, like he has all that laid out for him already established. Now it's like I can just build on top of that to make somebody even more powerful that May couldn't have ever become. So it would make sense that he would certainly want Osha out of the both of them for sure.
Yeah.
But let's get into our next segment here, and that's going to be the light side. Pros from this week's episode that really stood out to you guys that you were a big fan of. I'll go first real quick. Couple things. I kind of dug the unknown planet title. I saw some people laughing online about it, like unknown planet, but I'm like, I've just assumed it's the unknown regions. Maybe this isn't a planet that at this point is discovered. Doesn't really have a name. You might be onto something, Will, in regards to it being Octu. I feel like that may be a little bit too on the nose. Like we just visited, we were just at this planet, The Last Jedi, but maybe there is something to it. I saw some other people pulling out some other planet names from the unknown region. I didn't write any of these down, so I'm not even going to try and pronounce them, sort of thing. But I don't know if they're from legends or if they've been an established canon or whatever the case may be. But I have seen some people throw out another planet name. But I kind of dig the mystery behind it, so it certainly worked for me. I didn't mind the return to Kofar, although the only thing I really cared for about the return for Kofar was the revisiting the bodies. I thought it was a great directing choice to have a close-up of Jecki, just like the first scene that we get back there. And it's just her still face just in the camera, just to remind you of like the slaughter that kind of took place. So I thought that was actually kind of startling and a little unsettling, but I thought it was a great shot. And I also enjoyed Vanessa talking about the senators in here, especially Senator Rayancourt, I believe his name is. There is something about Star Wars that I like knowing what the political landscape is looking like. And I thought this was really cool about at least giving us a little bit insight into kind of like the political world that we were in. Understand that there's a powerful senator out there trying to kind of gain power, maybe not necessarily the friendliest or has like the highest opinion of the Jedi, if you will. And it would kind of make sense to see the Jedi wanting to kind of keep their hands clean and not let it be known, because then at the end of the day, like you mentioned, Stuart, right? Like if they look at these people as like these political hacks or people that are out to kind of get them, the idea of hearing about a powerful senator out there and wanting to kind of keep your hands clean as a Jedi just kind of makes sense to want to brush all this under the rug while you can. And if anything, it makes me kind of curious as to like, what's the pecking order of senators? Like, is he eventually going to become a chancellor himself? I would like to know who's the chancellor right now. Like, these are all elements of Star Wars that I'm a big fan of, is the political world. And so I thought there was a cool little insight in regards to the senators, but I wouldn't find out some more about what's going on politically. But yeah, those are just some of the things that I had outside of just the great chemistry between Quimir and Osha in this week's episode. They really carried this episode to me. Oh, you know what? I'll even add one more. Lee Jung-jae again. You know, I know the moments in which he's with May on ship was kind of boring at times, but I gotta tell you, man, he's got this moment when he leaves the bridge and he's just in his emotions. He goes up to like this panel and it's just the camera's looking at his back and he just throws his fist on the thing, on the dashboard. And it has this great close-up shot of him. And you can see the emotions building. You can see the tears building. Like, just he looks around the ship and it's empty. He feels alone. And Lee Jung-jae just emotes as incredible as he possibly can. And then just that flip of the emotion, you could see him bottling it all up inside of him, right? Like, it's just not the Jedi way to express yourself like that. And the fact that he goes back to his trainings and he just submerges all of those feelings again, and then he gets back to work. You know, like he's still struggling, but he puts those raw emotions deep down inside. And I just thought it was a masterful job from Lee Jung-jae in regards to letting us see Master Soul's emotions in this episode for sure.
Definitely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. I think that was one of my light sides, was just he is just acting his ass off.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. What about you guys? Any other light sides?
I got to give it to the photography or the videography for when they're on the planet that I'm not going to say is Octu, but looks very similar to Octu. I think the one thing making me think it's not Octu though is because what are they called, the porgs, right, from Last Jedi? Like, those things were all over the planet, so I feel like we would have at least saw a handful of them here or there. So that's like the one thing. But just the visuals there were just absolutely stunning wherever they filmed that. It just looked absolutely gorgeous. And then again, I think like we've been saying this word a lot for this review, but I think it's just the symbolism was just so perfect. Again, with the dialogue that happened between Quimir and with Osha, the way he's like trying to turn her to the dark side, it just felt I don't know. It felt more personal than you would normally get in a Star Wars story. Like you look at with Palpatine and with Anakin Skywalker, the manipulation. Yeah, it felt like he was kind of talking to Anakin's personal side, but not like to his own personal side, like the way Quimir is in this episode. So I really, really love that dynamic. And then, yeah, even though I wasn't a fan of, all the stuff going on with Soul and with May, I got to give it, though, the acting was still pretty stellar, like all the way through from everyone in this episode. And then, yeah, I like how there's still that other piece that's there with the Jedi, essentially, especially with Venestra, right, that's her name, with Venestra, and like how it seemingly feels like a thread that's like completely unrelated to everything going on. But I feel like if my theory is half correct, if like a part of it is correct, I feel like it is all going to get tied together by the time we get to the end of the season.
Real quick before we build off of what Stuart said, shout out to Scotty for certainly coming through, shipping himself with Quimir over here. Skull Man, good to see you, Scotty. Well, somebody else popped up. Spice Runners, what's up, Spice Runners Lounge? Thank you so much for certainly coming through today and joining us for our conversation, man. Definitely appreciate it.
Spice Runners, you're late on that last shipment. No, I'm kidding.
Mr. Chris says, light side for me was the path to the dark side. The way he was describing his perspective of her gifts, that was tough. Yeah, I was gonna say, man, if there was any like, bro, you tempted me. Like, dark side Darkside don't sound too bad right now. But yeah, man, he was super tempting for sure.
You mean I can have powers and I can actually not suppress my emotions? Count me in.
I love the line of where she says, but those paths lead to the dark side, and he's like, semantics, you know.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Such a great
From a
line.
certain point of view.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
What about you guys? Any other light sides?
I mean, the lore. I touched on this earlier, and also we were just discussing here. But I think just for folks who haven't read the legends and books and stuff, or deep into it, I did like the fact that they shared what the material was the helmet was made out of, the cortosis.
Yeah.
So that was so little things like that were my light sides for the week. In addition to all of the things we talked about, I mean, we really we discussed the issues with the Senate and the council and the political side. So that was also another big light side for me this week. But
and
yeah,
just to bounce off of that, he said, "Did you see the vein of cortosis running through the cave?"
yeah, I did see that. Yeah, I mean that's for that helps us casual Star Wars fan understand what's going on. I mean, the folks who are steeped in the lore, read all the Legends stuff. Oh yeah, they were like, oh yeah, I remember that from whatever book back in from Legends. But even though for some folks it may seem like, well, duh, but for casual Star Wars fan, I think those are nice nods to recognize that this is a big universe and not everybody knows like all the ins and outs of things. So yeah, so I do appreciate those little small touches from time to time.
Yeah, they go a long way for sure.
I also loved how the way the cortosis helmet was like kind of described when you're wearing it, how it's only you and what you bring with you. I love how it kind of reflects Yoda and Luke in episode 5 on Dagobah.
Yep. Again, yeah. Again, she whatever you may feel about the way this series has been written. I've said it before on our prior reviews, but I mean, she knows her stuff as far as Star Wars. You can't fault the lore aspects of this show. It really uses it and mines it very, very well.
Yeah, I was having, I don't want to say an argument, just but a back and forth conversation with somebody about one of the shorts that we posted on YouTube, and they were just like, Leslie Headland's just not a fan of Star Wars, and I'm just like, how can you say that? Like, are you clearly you're not watching the show, because she's got some deep cuts. Like, she clearly is an extended Universal Legends fan, and she's got some really deep cuts in there. And they're like, oh well, she has a room full of writers that don't know Star Wars, and I was like, that's not true. Like, there's an article out there that literally says she's got one writer in the writer's room that is not a Star Wars fan. And she says she put that person in there specifically because they didn't want to nerd out too much. They need somebody that's like a general audience person, right? That will have questions and kind of push back against certain things. So I'm like, I don't think there's anything wrong with having one person in the writing's room like that, but to manipulate things and say it's like, oh, the whole writer team doesn't know Star Wars, like that's just not true. And you can tell if you're actually watching the show, they know their stuff for sure.
And even if, and I'm not saying it is true, but even if it was true, this whole thing gets checked by Dave Filoni before it goes into production. They have people to make sure that it still fits into the lore of Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. Crystal, did you have any light side elements this week besides making Star Wars into House of the Dragon?
I just want to give another round to the romance that we're getting in Star Wars. I just want more romance in Star Wars. I'm a Libra. I'm all about love. I'm all about romance. I'm about the yearning. So I'm excited that we're finally getting some of that in Star Wars. It feels like Star Wars has been so afraid to touch romance. I'm just hoping it doesn't end in tragedy. So I don't know. I also think with Osha putting on the mask at the end of the episode, like, girl is in the dark side. That's her gateway drug.
Yeah, they called it a sensory deprivation sort of helmet, which I kind of dug. I mean, the idea that he wears that during his battles. I mean, talk about being one with the Force, right, and bringing all those emotions with you, sort of thing. And I do love how when she puts it on, like all the music stops and all you hear is her kind of breathing. I thought that was a nice touch for this episode
Yeah.
too.
It was a great touch, and obvious. I mean, it was obvious the breathing pattern that she was making too, which again gets to this discussion we had a couple minutes ago. But with Vader and all that. But it was, yeah, I like that. I like that touch. And Crystal, you're right about the romance. I mean, because we saw that with Andor, but with having an adult relationship. I mean, someone actually spent the night with somebody. They had her getting dressed. Later. Yeah, and if this was House of the Dragon, yeah, we would have seen the saber. But oh gosh, amen, you sweet, amen. But anyway, but
do you think there's a romance brewing here between these two? I mean, he did like lightly grab her wrist,
I don't know if it's a romance because I'm
swooning over there.
Yeah. Because Crystal, your other point too is if it is a romance, that's the sad thing about Star Wars, in that when romances do happen, bad things happen. Han and Leia got divorced. Andor,
Jin and Cassian died.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
So
Anakin
I'm kind of like,
love.
yeah. But I mean, but it really, yeah.
Toxic
But I mean,
relationships, man.
sad stories. Romeo, yeah. But I do think that they really, even though he's Darth Thirst Trap, it was still like the seductive nature of the dark side of the Force, and really the passions and stuff, and and it really plays to like what Osha, going back to her scenes with May earlier in the series. She is, at the end of the day, I mean, we're seeing it's going to be, maybe wrong, but Osha's going to be the one actually that flips and not and not May.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Just like the intimacy of their scenes together, like everything was definitely done very purposefully. And whether or not it was meant to be romantic or not, it does like make you feel like they are romanticizing the dark side and tempting you and making you want to come into. Even me again. I was like, damn, like I'm ready for the dark side. Like you're making it sound so tempting right now. But
let's party.
Quamir literally said, and desire.
Yeah, just the delivery. Yeah, man.
Got it.
Yeah, take my Sith card, please. I'll take one. So yeah, but yeah, guys, let us know your guys' light side of the episode. But we got look, while there was some good in this episode, there had to be some dark side in this episode. Even though we love the dark side in this episode for sure. What are some things that didn't necessarily work for you guys?
I want to go first for this one.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so when I was rewatching this, some of the writing, like at first I thought it was the acting, but I think it's the writing of some of the dialogue scenes. And as much as I am here for Quamir and Osha, like I wrote this down, so because it was so bad. It was so bad. Quamir says, they didn't want you, like the Jedi didn't want you. And Osha says, I left. He goes, why? And she goes, I chose to. And he goes, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? And then she goes, let me go. Like, have you guys seen the behind the scenes video of Anakin and Padme in Attack of the Clones, where he's like holding her and she's like, let me go? But it's like them two saying the lines to each other. And so he's like saying something to her, and then Padme goes, let me go. But he's not even holding her. Have you guys seen that? But that's what that reminded me of, because it was just kind of like, like, and there was just like nothing really said between them. It was just so cheesy, felt like bad writing. Like, give us something, tell us why you left, tell us that he's wrong, or like something. So I think that is really where I was like, come on, like give us a little bit more spice.
Like it wasn't spicy enough. I want more spice.
A little bit more substance,
Yeah, no, I totally get you in that regard. I guess like for me, I think that's another point. Like I feel like this season has done a good job of at least letting us know why she is, I don't want to say flipping so easily, but you would like to hear that from the character themselves. You
Yeah,
know, like
right.
let it out, girl. Like maybe that's what we're building up to in episode, the finale, where she just lets it all out as to like why she's just had enough of it. I have no idea, but you're right. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more emotion from her in that.
Yeah, like maybe she could have been like scared of him or like I don't know, she was so flat. You had said this earlier, Adam, but she was just kind of like following him around and being like, "Why am I here?" But then would like follow him around everywhere instead of like I want to see like a little bit of a progression from her being like scared of him or unsure to her being seduced by the dark side to her being a dark side person. Right now it's just kind of like
Yeah.
What about you guys?
Yeah, I just to piggyback on that. I mean, that's really we are as far as my dark side, it is the flip flopping and just the lack of foundation for it. I guess is really what you're saying, Crystal. It's just like there's just no foundation for these swings of like one week May is like let's kill all the Jedi. I mean, literally like and then like turn at a time like oh you know what I'm gonna go turn myself in and so that and I think it's just at its core is it's just these run times. They just don't have
They don't allow
the
for it.
they don't allow for it. So you just got to, at this point, I'm just like, okay, I just got to run with it. That's what, the runtime handicaps them from being able to explore some of the things that we've talked about here. And so that's, that's going to be my dark side every week with this show. So I'm just going to, for the next 2 weeks, I'll just stipulate to that now.
I will. Before you go, Stuart, I can I push back on the both of you real quick here in regards to that point, because I there are elements I do agree with you, but I do think context wise, I think it's there. I think it's there as to the flip flopping. Like again, I do think the moment that we had in episode 5 when we got May and Osha, clearly that didn't go well. I think to me at least that shows why she's in the position that she's in, why she wanted to turn from in Kofar turn on Quimir at that time. That felt like that was kind of out of left field to me personally. But the idea of where we find May at right now in regards to things didn't work out with me and my sister, I'm just going to kind of burn it down. I think the context has been built up in these episodes. And the same thing with Osha. I think we've started from episode 1 all the way to where we are right now in regards to the fact that she couldn't let go of her relationships, the fact that she couldn't handle her loss, her grief, feeling like a failure sort of thing. I think they've laid the groundwork for where we're at today. So I do think the context is there. Where I will agree with you guys is the 30-minute time limit on these episodes don't allow the execution of those moments to come across more clearly for people, I think, or to like really build upon it. Because you guys mentioned some of the times too, is like we want to see these characters actually express these feelings, but it feels like while the context and the reasoning are there, we're waiting each episode for somebody to just say something sometimes, right? Like we're literally still waiting for this mystery to really unfold and tell itself, but it feels like they're waiting to the last episode for everybody to just let everything out finally to kind of explain themselves. And I think that's really where the frustrating part comes in. So while I think the context is there to give them reason to, I think the execution of it all has been pretty poor.
That's a very good point. And I think that we've talked about this before. If the show had been like just dropped all at once, so you can just like consume it, because I think it's just these chops that also doesn't help when it's a week to week release like it is to like build to follow up with those context clues that you mentioned, Adam.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I think these episodes definitely need to be longer for sure. Because I mean, you guys even talked about in the comments the idea like maybe this should have been a movie, like the way that they execute it. Sometimes feels like sometimes they're just trying to stretch it out a little bit by giving us those little drop sizes. But yeah, give me some.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, if it's a person who is used to constructing a movie versus a television show, there are two different mediums. I mean, they're both visual, but The way you arc a television season versus a movie are completely different. So maybe, and I think, I think most of these folks in these shows have been film directors and writers. Well, some of the TV writers at least have been, showrunners have been film people, more so than TV people. So
yeah, and I think that's one, and I think we talked about this last week or on episode 4, the idea that the Marvel's dealing with that too, is that while they call them television series, they produce them like they're movies chopped up into 6 to 8 pieces, when, like you said, Will, in reality, movie and TVs are just not the same.
Yeah.
Like the way that you execute them, the format is completely different. So yeah, maybe you do need like television writers to actually do this type of stuff or format it that way. But it does feel like a movie chopped up into 8 bits here.
Yeah, and here's because Andor is definitely an exception to that, because that's one that you watch and it feels like it was formatted for television specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
how long were those episodes?
Like 40. They were pretty long, actually, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
right?
they all live action Star Wars needs to have that treatment, regardless if it looks as cinematic or well written like that. It needs to be longer. It needs to be longer. This isn't animation, y'all.
They're like 45, 50 minutes. Yeah.
Because I'd say my biggest dark side with this episode, and it's been kind of the dark side with this whole series, is just the pacing. Because like it's really easy to just kind of like say, oh yeah, the Osha and Soul, or not Osha, sorry, the May and Soul stuff was like the most boring part of the episode for me, and it was. But I think because of the reason is just because of like how it just feels like nothing happens, and it's just so much padding throughout the whole thing. And I think it all comes down to like we have to take like this little bit of a story and we got to stretch it out for at least 20 to 30 minutes, rather than having it play out like an episode where, I feel like they could have done a lot more with it if they did it that way. So I think that, that's definitely going to be my dark side, I think, for the next 2 reviews, assuming that they go the same way, which is just going to be the pacing, honestly. And then it leads to moments of dialogue. I didn't bring this up because when I was talking about the dialogue between Osha and why do I always forget the Sith name in this? Quimir. Yeah, sorry. when I was talking about the dialogue between Osha and Quimir, I totally had forgotten that there was also some moments that were pretty bad that I think Crystal brought up, where it just, again, you get scenes that are really great between them, but then, you have scenes like the whole let me go, kind of thing. And you get scenes where it feels like, neither character is really saying anything. And again, kind of like with everything going on with Soul and May, it just feels like padding.
Yeah, I think even from my light side, I've got pacing and direction at times. So I'm right there with you, Stuart, in regards to the pacing of the episode. One of my dark sides in here, I didn't really there's an element in here where it just feels like Disney humor. And that's when was it May and Basil have a moment in the lower deck, right? When he asks her to go ahead and try and do the repairs on the outside, and she goes to the portion of the ship, and you got this little creature in Basil trying to like wrestle with her and stomps on her foot, and then you've got Pip that throws the oil in her eye. She's like, ow, like it just felt like this is a moment for kids, like it just the timing, it just felt really off from the rest of the episode. So I didn't really care for the Disney humor moment that we had in here. And I did have the light whip in action. I had it actually both as a light side, which I was like, oh, that's cool. But then the second one was like, that's it. Like that's literally what we saw in the trailers. Like that's literally all that we saw in the small little snippet that they wind up showcasing to us. So while I have the light whip in action as a light side and dark side, I very much am aware that, again, Leslie Headland does not show anything unless it's meaningful or meant to be touched upon at some point in time. So it would not surprise me if this light whip thing comes back at some point in time to have a big moment. So we'll see. But yeah, those are some of my downsides also.
Agree with both of you.
But now that we've got the dark side out of the way, it is time to grade this week's episode. So using the legend down below, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this live, it is time for each of us to grade this episode. If you were to bring your report card home to show your parents for episode 6 of The Acolyte, what would that grade B. Crystal, we'll start with you. What are you going to give this week's episode?
I'm going to give it a 94, a solid A.
Oh, wow. Okay, nice. All right, let me hold on. A 94, you said?
Yes, I liked it more than last week, and I graded last week, I think, at a 92. So
Yeah, okay. Man, it's that's Oshmere really getting her. What
exactly.
about
Yes.
what about you, Will? What are you getting this week's episode?
I would give it a 85.
A B? Okay.
Yep.
What about you, Stu?
Wow, I'm going to be the meanest out of everyone here. I'm giving this one a 70.
Oh my God, that feels personal.
It's screw Oshmere.
Excuse me. I
to
am
be
right
fair,
here.
to be fair, the Oshmere is the thing that stopped me from giving it a D.
Oh,
wow.
wait, Stu, wait.
Or no, sorry, not the
you
Oshmere
gotta-
specifically, but
you
specifically everything that happened on that side of the
Yeah.
episode is what stopped. It's what makes it a C for me, because it is a half decent episode in that area, but like, you know, not good enough to like make me forgive the fact that it's like, man, like nothing happened.
You know, I was gonna say, Stuart, but you said you liked half this episode. Well, technically, I guess that's like a 50%. So then you liked 50% of it and more. So okay, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess
because like I mentioned when we were talking about our dark side, because even that part of the episode that I loved wasn't perfect. It did still have some kind of awkward moments here and there that like they're easy to forgive because everything else around it was pretty good, but it's still there.
I get you. I am probably gonna go B minus here for me. Give me an 80. So I'm just gonna go at the low end of a B minus here for me. So we will divide that up by 4, and we're at an 82%. So a B minus for this week's episode also.
Wow, I'm shocked that I liked it the most. That's crazy.
Hey, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I'm glad you like. I was really shocked too. But I mean, as much you did boast about this episode a lot though, and you made some really great points. I think for me, it was I kind of agreed a little bit with the padding of the episode. So that's probably what brought my thing down. But I still enjoyed it. But I'm glad you enjoyed it as much as you did, Crystal, for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think if I wasn't like on a ship, like I probably would be right there with you. Yeah. Oh, Scotty said it. Crystal's only like because of the yearning. So true. Literally.
That actually helped me. That dynamic with them really did push it up for me as well. But also just our discussion this evening. I came into it honestly with the C
A lightsaber
grade,
through your
actually.
head.
Yeah, and a lightsaber through my head, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But but actually, the more as we talked about it, it actually raised my grading for this episode, because I think it really did have a lot of good points, and also I think it was just the it's sort of since we're getting the penultimate episode next week, it was just that bridge episode to get us to that one.
And I agree with you. I have a feeling like these next 2 episodes are going to be pretty heavy. I'm definitely expecting that final flashback next week for sure. Soul was I'm still trying to figure out how to read Soul at the end of this episode. I'm trying to figure out like what his emotional level is, because he looked very villainous to me at the end. Like he was waiting for this moment. The way he was talking is like, look, girl, I've been waiting for 16 years to have this conversation with you, and you about to get it. And so I'm trying to figure out like what sort of Soul are we going to get in episode number 7. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how this story is going to be told from his perspective, I would assume. But I'd expect a flashback to really let us know what happened on Brandok, and then the fallout in episode 8. So I'm expecting 2 big episodes to wrap up this season. What about you guys?
Yeah. Do you think he's taking Osha to Brendok? Is that the planet?
Ooh, you know what? That's a good question, because Homeboy did not want to be around when the Jedi Masters came by. They were like, just stay where you are. Boom, right into hyperspace. I mean, he was.
Where did they go?
That would not surprise me. I think that's a great call.
I think it's an excellent call, especially given what he said to her at the end there, as far as like, I'm telling you what's, really what went down that night.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see. Hold on, let me see. Old Mister has a question for us. Did you read what Headland said about Raylo being inspiration? Do you think Kylo's theme in the show is just a nod to that, or do you think it's deeper? That's a good question.
It could lead to the theory that a lot of people have of Quimir being the founder of the Knights of Ren.
That's a possibility too. I think it's either that or the OSHA or the Oshmir stuff for sure. Because it did kick in when those two were together at the end. I don't know if that theme popped up anywhere else in that episode besides that very end moment, but it could be either or. Those are yeah, I would say either or. Any last minute theories? Stuart, I know we heard yours. Crystal, did we hear your theory? And speculation before we go?
I'm just here to boost Stuart's theory.
Okay.
I'm in support.
All right.
I like
the
it. Yeah.
rogue Padawan that the Jedi is trying to cover up.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have a theory or speculation about what's gonna go down. Besides the one that I think Venestra is a red herring, and I think that there is I think she's been his master, but I do think there's somebody else that he is not letting us in on that might have caused those scars on his back. But we'll see. All right. Any last thoughts on this week's episode?
I don't know where we're going for the next two episodes.
I have no idea.
I just hope that what'll probably happen is we'll get a cliffhanger in the finale, and then who knows what'll.
I hope not. No, what I'm expecting is the penultimate to be like the clarification episode, like filling in all the big questions that we have, and then episode 8 being like the overall big showdown.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think when we talked about it too this past weekend on A+ Hero Report, we go live every Sunday at we don't really have a time. We just go live every Sunday. We make it up as we go. Yeah, be there or be square. You know, we talked about a Leslie Headland interview that she had with Entertainment Weekly, and she said season 1 will have a definitive ending. Mm-hmm. She did say that there may be some things that are left to be explored in future seasons. I think she said she has 4 or 5 other mysteries that she would like to kind of explore if they get a season 2 and more. But she did say she put everything into this season 1 to make sure that it had a beginning, middle, and an end. So we will get some answers.
Good. I'm happy to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, guys, before we wrap up, is there any last comments in here? Raphael says, I think the Jedi will not come out looking good at the end if they haven't already. So yeah. But yeah, other than that, guys, let's give some shout outs to everybody and let them know where they can find you on social media. Crystal, if people want to find you, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Twitter at Crystal Kyber _. Also, I'm here on YouTube. I make videos, and yeah, find me on there. Crystal Kyber.
And Will, if people want to find you on social media, where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me on socials. My personal handle is at Will M. Polk. You can find our show handles on Twitter at Cena Nerd, and on Instagram and Threads at scene_n_nerd. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. Let's go by going to our website. I have the link there to it, www.scenernerdpodcast.com. We're in the middle of Dragons and Suits series. So we just reviewed episode 3 of House of the Dragon and episode 5 of The Boys. So check it out. It's on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts now.
Hey, you dropped that today, didn't you? I think I shared it around also. Yeah. So go ahead and check it out, guys. No problem. Anytime. Stuart, what about you? Where can people find you on social media?
You guys can, of course, find me here at A+ Hero Report, but you can also find me on Instagram at TurboStew01 right over here.
And guys, if you want to follow us, as always, here at A+ Opinions down below and everywhere on social media. You can also find us over on TikTok at Hero Report. If you love a forum community, we do have a Discord in the description box below. You can go ahead and click on that link if you want to join us over there. Yeah, follow us everywhere on social media. But that will do it for us. Just a reminder for everybody, we do go live every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Central Time. We got 2 more episodes left, guys, so hopefully we'll certainly see you guys next week as well. But that's going to do it for us here. So until next time, guys, do us a favor. As always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep it A+. May the force be with you. We'll talk to you later. Bye.